Every civilization thinks it will last forever. The Romans did. So did the Soviets. Even prosperous nations like Argentina and Venezuela believed their systems were too strong to fail. Yet history shows that collapse doesn't always look like chaos overnight. It's a slow unraveling, followed by a sudden fall. Right now, many of the same warning signs are flashing again. The question isn't if collapse can happen, it's how close we already are. Welcome to Prepper's Paradigm, your channel dedicated to practical prepping and disaster preparedness. I use a computer-generated voice because my own is hard to understand due to an injury. In this video, we'll look at 6 real examples of collapse, from the fall of Rome to the economic crisis in Venezuela, and see what lessons they hold for preppers today. These events reveal how societies fail, how ordinary people survive, and what warning signs are appearing in America right now. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Understanding how collapse really happens is the first step toward staying ready when it does. The Roman Empire didn't collapse overnight. It was a slow decay that lasted centuries. The warning signs were visible for generations: rising debt, corruption, overextended borders, and constant political division. Ordinary citizens felt it long before historians ever marked the fall. As taxes rose and currency lost value, the economy hollowed out. Roads and aqueducts crumbled, armies were stretched thin, and loyalty shifted from the empire to whoever could offer protection and food. By the time the barbarians arrived at the gates, Rome had already collapsed from within. Today, we see familiar patterns: a nation divided, spending that outpaces production, and a growing sense that the system no longer serves everyone. History shows that empires fall not when they run out of enemies, but when they run out of unity and accountability. For preppers, the lesson is clear: collapse rarely comes suddenly. It's a slow erosion of stability, visible to anyone willing to look. Build resilience while there's still time, not when the systems you rely on have already failed. In the early 1930s, the United States faced its greatest economic collapse. The stock market crashed, banks closed their doors, and millions of Americans lost everything. Farms failed, businesses went under, and for many, food became the hardest thing to find. People learned quickly that survival didn't depend on government aid or bank accounts. It depended on what they could produce, trade, and share with trusted neighbors. Families planted gardens, repaired what they had, and relied on practical skills to stay afloat. Today, the economy looks strong on paper, but it's more fragile than ever. A sudden downturn, supply chain shock, or major cyber attack could disrupt food deliveries and banking systems overnight. Just like in the 1930s, those who rely entirely on the system will be hit the hardest. The lesson for preppers is simple: food, skills, and self-sufficiency are more reliable than digital dollars. When the system stops working, those who can feed themselves and help others without relying on outside supply chains are the ones who endure. In 1991, one of the world's superpowers vanished almost overnight. The Soviet Union's fall shocked the world, but for those living through it, the signs have been visible for years. Corruption, inefficiency, and propaganda had eaten away at trust long before the final collapse. When the system broke, wages stopped, stores emptied, and people turned to barter to survive. Neighbors traded fuel for food or clothing for medicine. Entire cities went dark, and the safety net that millions depended on disappeared. Centralized systems can work until they don't. The Soviet collapse proved how quickly an entire structure can fail when it relies too heavily on control from the top. Once that control breaks, chaos spreads faster than anyone expects. For preppers, the lesson is straightforward: build independence at the individual and local level. Have what you need to survive even if national systems, power, banking, or transport, stop working. In every collapse, those with options outside the system are the ones who make it through. Between 1998 and 2002, Argentina went from prosperity to panic. Years of debt and government mismanagement caught up all at once. The banks froze accounts, inflation exploded, and people couldn't access their own money. Overnight, middle-class families became poor. Daily life continued, but it became unpredictable and dangerous. Robberies increased, stores emptied, and the value of paper money changed by the hour. Those who had cash savings lost nearly everything, while those who owned hard assets or had tradable skills managed to hang on. The United States isn't Argentina, but the patterns are familiar: soaring debt, inflation, and public frustration. When trust in financial institutions breaks down, it doesn't matter how advanced the country is. Once confidence disappears, the system unravels fast. For preppers, the takeaway is clear. Tangible goods, security, and adaptability matter far more than paper assets. Inflation erases savings, but supplies and practical skills retain their value. Build flexibility into your plans, because when the economy cracks, it's the adaptable who survive. Venezuela was once one of the richest nations in South America. It had vast oil reserves and a strong economy, but after years of corruption, government control, and reckless spending, the system began to collapse. Inflation hit millions of percent, and the country's wealth vanished almost overnight. Basic items disappeared. Food, medicine, and fuel became scarce. Families fled the country in search of stability. Those who stayed learned to survive through barter, homegrown food, and neighborhood support networks, often under the threat of crime and violence. More than a decade later, Venezuela still struggles to recover. Inflation is rising sharply again now, and analysts warn that hyperinflation could return. For many citizens, it feels like the cycle of collapse never truly ended. The lesson for preppers is simple. Dependence is dangerous. Build redundancy into your life: food, water, medicine, and energy. Don't rely on government promises or foreign supply chains. Those who planned ahead in Venezuela didn't thrive, but they survived. And in collapse, survival is success. In 2020, the world faced a crisis unlike anything seen in generations. The pandemic exposed just how fragile modern life had become. Within weeks, store shelves emptied, supply chains broke down, and even basic items like toilet paper and disinfectant disappeared. Many believed it would only last a few weeks, but as months dragged on, it became clear that the systems we take for granted, healthcare, logistics, and manufacturing, were never built to handle sustained disruption. Dependence on global imports left nations vulnerable, and panic spread faster than the virus itself. The pandemic served as a stress test for modern society. It showed how quickly a world built on convenience can grind to a halt. And it reminded us that most people aren't prepared for even short-term isolation, let alone long-term crisis. For preppers, COVID-19 confirmed what we already knew. Preparedness isn't paranoia, it's peace of mind. Those who had supplies, backup power, and self-reliance avoided the panic that swept through the rest of the population. The lesson is clear. Don't wait for the next wake-up call to get ready. Every collapse looks different on the surface, but the pattern is always the same. It starts with overconfidence, the belief that the system can't fail. Then come debt, division, and the slow breakdown of trust. Finally, something small tips the balance, and everything that looks stable begins to fall apart. Rome, the Soviet Union, Argentina, Venezuela, they all ignored the early warning signs. So did the United States in 2020. History's lesson is clear. Collapse doesn't come out of nowhere. It builds over years, hidden behind comfort and routine. For preppers, these stories aren't just history. They're a blueprint. Every one of these collapses proved that those who had food, water, and independence made it through. The systems may change, but human nature doesn't. The unprepared always suffer first. The warning signs are flashing again. The question isn't whether collapse can happen here. It's how well prepared you'll be when it does. History shows that collapse doesn't always mean the end. For those who are ready, it's the beginning of something new, a simpler, more independent way of life. If you found this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe. Visit preppersparadigm.com for more practical prepping and disaster preparedness advice. Stay ready, stay steady, and remember, the best time to prepare was yesterday. The next best time is now.